Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today we will learn about a new topic. So how does the food component affects the glycemic index? I will try to keep this discussion very brief and understandable. So at first let's talk about protein. Food rich in fat and proteins like ice creams, milk, groundnuts have a low glycemic index. Apparently, as our basic general knowledge says that ice cream, groundnut, milk have a very good amount of calorie, but they have a low glycemic index. So we should surely suggest them to our diabetes patients, right? As they have low glycemic index, but they are not recommended in diabetics because they have a very high caloric value. Although they have a low glycemic index, but they have a very high calorie value. That's why protein and fat are not suggested to the diabetes patient. On the other hand, pulses or lentils, which have a very high protein, but they are also low in glycemic index compared to cereals. After that comes carbohydrate. We all know that complex carbohydrates are very good for diabetes patient. But why so? Starch have very low glycemic index compared to sugar. As the fruits ripes, the starch gets converted to glucose and the glycemic index increases. So that's why the ripened fruits are kind of the amount is shortened in the diabetes patient. Another thing is the glycemic index of starch is affected by the proportion of amylopectin in the grains. We know most of the grains have two types of carbohydrate. Those are amylose and amylopectin. So the higher the proportion of amylopectin, the higher the glycemic index. It's because the amylopectin is made of branched starch molecules and is more easily hydrolyzed than the amylose in our gut. Some starches are more slowly digested, not only because of amylose content, but also because of they are protected in structure, like a very hard structure. Those foods are very resistant to the enzyme act. So food with soluble fibers such as beans have a low glycemic index, as I have mentioned earlier. The extent to which the fiber in a particular food is responsible for its glycemic index is a subject to debate still now. So the factors that affects the carbohydrate absorption are something like so the rate of absorption of carbohydrate is decreased in the presence of intact plant cells wall, the dense physical structure of starchy food, and the presence of protein and fat. This is the in short description of this whole discussion. There is another thing that may increase or decrease the glycemic index of the food, that is acidity. You will notice there is a huge trend nowadays that people are suggesting, random people are suggesting apple cider vinegars to everybody as a part of weight losing diet. So this is the point where comes our glycemic index and the acidity relationship. An increase in acidity of a meal can greatly lower the glycemic index. Increase the amount of vinegar in a meal, for instance, will affect the glucose response. In addition, the natural phytic acid that is usually found in cereals and pulses may have a more dominant role in decreasing sugar rise than fiber. So, in some cases, sourdough bread in a meal can result in different in glycemic index depending its content of organic acid. We know sourdough contain very good amount of organic acid. These foods apparently affect the glucose response at least partially by slowing the gastric emptying. So now we can understand why apple cider vinegars and other vinegars are suggested by some nutritionists or dietitians to some people, not everybody. That they may slower gastric emptying in some people, not everyone. And this is how the glucose response is decreased. So, for example, you would get some glucose for 5 hours from a food you have ingested. For example, you will get energy or glucose from a food you have ingested for 2 hours. So, some apple cider vinegar or some acidic food may increase this time like 4 hours. So, it's just a metaphorical example. So, yes, that's how acidity works on the glucose response.